A boil water advisory is in effect for roughly 150,000 people in Mississippi's capital. Residents were seen lining up at water distribution centers and stores in hope of getting some relief. Over the weekend, severe flooding damaged the city's water treatment plant, causing the system to fail. Yesterday, President Biden vowed to help the city's recovery efforts. However, Jackson has a history of water system problems that were never addressed. Now that the issue has hit a crisis point, there are growing questions about the city's infrastructure and racial inequity. Let's bring in our panel now for more on this. Jackson, Mississippi Councilman Aaron Banks and Trey Baker are both here. Councilman Banks represents the city's 6th Ward. Trey Baker is a partner at Barnes and Thornburg. He previously served as a senior advisor for public engagement to President Biden. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. Councilman Banks, I'm going to start with you. The situation growing more dire with every day that passes, not just drinking water, but the water pressure is so unreliable that people can't even count on that tainted water to flush their toilets. Spell out how the water shortage is impacting you and what's happening on the ground there.
Listen, first of all, thank you for having us. It is very impactful. For me and myself, my family, we had to travel about 12 minutes to my mother's house to shower, to brush our teeth, and do all the necessities in order for us to get to work, get children to school and everything. One of the things I can say is that citizens of Jackson are very resilient because, unfortunately, this has become a new norm for us. Ever since the winter storm of last year, which started February, we have not gone a month without having either a boil water notice or without having low to no pressure. This has been every month. We've been under boil water notice a little over a month now. And so, it's time for us to not only make sure that we have the proper plan that's necessary, but it's time for us to make sure that we get all the resources necessary so that we can provide a permanent fix to the system.
Trey, you hear the councilman say not a month has gone by without them having water problems. It seems extraordinary here in the United States that this problem continues. So what are the biggest failures you've observed in the response to this crisis? And what is it exposed about the inequality that Jackson faces?
Well, I think the councilman was right on point in saying that this is an ongoing situation. What we've seen in this country is a lack of investment in infrastructure over the course of years. And so, the good thing that we see here is that the President Biden and the Biden administration have passed the bipartisan infrastructure law. And in passing that, you had cities like Jackson in mind as places that had disinvestment over the course of so many years and had crumbling infrastructure. And so a state like Mississippi stands to see about $450 million in infrastructure investment go in through the president's plan. And so that's what we can say is good. In terms of the response, you can also say that it's been an immediate response from the federal government with scrambling all of the resources from the EPA and also from FEMA to get down to Jackson and do the job. Now that we're at this crisis point, we have to focus on getting water back to the people, making sure that people have clean drinking water in every situation, and then turn to creating a plan that's going to be sustainable so that something like this doesn't happen again.
Trey, I want to follow up with you on that point because you mentioned the bipartisan infrastructure law, the state of Mississippi getting $450, but some estimates are that it's going to actually cost $1 billion to actually fix this problem. So it's not just Band-Aids, but it's actually substantial changes. Is this sufficient?
Well, I think you have to start with figuring out what the actual need is. And that's the part about coming up with a plan. There are resources out there, whether it's from the Delta Regional Authority or USDA Rural Development, to put a plan into place and start to figure out what that total cost will be. After that, you work your way into it in phases. And so there are resources out there to start phase one of some kind of fix for this, but it has to be identified what the problem is and then where you're going to go with it. And so at the very least, there's money there to make a start to the work that needs to be done.
Councilman Banks, I want to get your take on that. you've said that Jackson needs the same type of attention that Flint, Michigan received. Do you think that your city's needs are still not being taken seriously?
Well, look, I think right now we are in the perfect storm where those needs are being taken serious. One of the things that, National League of Cities, National Black Caucus, I serve as first vice president, that we've been pushing for example, the $74 million that we talk about that went to the state of Mississippi, went to Central Mississippi Plan and Development District. And so there's an application process that the city has to go through, but it has to be shared with other districts. One of the things we're pushing for is to make sure that these federal appropriations, that they come directly to the municipality, and it doesn't get hung up in the politics, or doesn't get caught up in the state, especially when you got a red state with a blue capital. And one of the things that Trey said, is that President Biden is doing all that he can do, and he talked about the emergency rapid response from the federal government. We need that that same type of federal emergency rapid response from the state of Mississippi, and we need, I believe that when President Biden had in mind setting aside the monies in the bipartisan infrastructure law, it was not to be sent to the state for a dollar-to-dollar match. It was sent to go directly to those areas where the need was. And so, we know these are some of the things that are very, very important to make sure that we address the plan. And just real quick, when we talk about this plan, the first thing is fixing the water treatment plants, JH Fuel and OB Curtis. We have to fix those. But then after that, I need two 48-inch lines to get to South Jackson, because I'm telling you, every month we have to go through the same thing. And until those lines are replaced, we're going to be in the same situation. So the first phase, as Trey said, it starts with those water treatment centers. Then we got to go in and start addressing the bones that are under the ground. And these are things that I've been pushing for since a councilman, to try to prioritize our public works and our public safety.
Councilman, it sounds like you know exactly what your city needs. And it's a very interesting point that you brought up, that the federal dollars go to the state and not necessarily where they're needed in your community, at least. Trey, you previously served as city manager of Grenada, which holds the second largest water system in the state of Mississippi. So you wear multiple hats. And in the case of Grenada, it doesn't have the same type of issues. Why is that? What inspections and measures were put in place to prevent a situation like this one from happening there?
Well, I do want to say Grenada is a much smaller area than Jackson. Jackson is serving about 160,000 people. Grenada was serving about an 8-county area, which was a larger kind of service provider area, but not the same number of people. I think some things that were put in place were, water operators that were experienced and actually knew the system through and through, and that's something that's going to have to happen in Jackson once this crisis starts to get their arm around this crisis. Then you have to move to making sure that you have the personnel in place that's going to be able to handle these types of issues. And then the other thing was essentially across the state, we are all struggling in getting the resources that we need. And so in the city of Grenada, we chose to make certain investments in the water system, but it's still something that people struggle with, and there's still more that can and should be done. So I think here we have to look at what's available to the city, look at what personnel they may have available to them. And a lot in the next 90 days is going to be happening from the Biden administration in sending those resources in from EPA, sending those planning resources in. And I think Jackson will have the opportunity to be able to make the changes that they need to get the drinking water to a place where their citizens can utilize it. Trey. And then after that, it'll just have to be nurtured to a point where you're looking for the next 50 years and making sure that you don't have another emergency situation.
Trey, as a former Biden administration advisor, when you start talking about the next 50 years, do you think that the White House has the capability in the current political situation to actually address this?
I believe so. When the Biden administration came in on the first day, President Biden signed an executive order on equity. So that means that everything that the president is doing is looking at each situation with equity in mind. So when you look at a situation like Jackson, Mississippi, like Flint, Michigan, something like the bipartisan infrastructure law was put into place so that you can go in and take lead pipes out of the ground all over the country, and over the next 10 years, this infrastructure going into communities, reconnecting communities, like he announced in Tulsa at the beginning of his administration. There is a vision for what this should look like. And this is just the type of situation that the president was looking at. The unfortunate thing is that it came out in an emergency situation the way it has in Jackson. And so at this point, I think there has to be focus on in the present, making sure that people are safe, making sure that people have clean drinking water, and then turning immediately to that plan so that you can build up and use those federal resources that have been coming in.
Certainly, it is a crisis right now. Trey Baker, Aaron Banks, we are thinking of you guys in Mississippi. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.